We've got Bob here. I'm Todd. Rick is over here, right? Rick just walked in. Connor, unfortunately, can't be here. And Brian is our documentation expert. He is remote. Okay, so I think the plan here is that we don't have anything to present. We're just going to mill around and assist people in what they're doing and talk to people individually. And we can do questions. Yeah, in fact, maybe we can start out with a few questions. So, I mean, the question was, and this is probably a common thing for people, is I've got a package file. What do I do? How do I start to make a Paclet? And so one question we asked was, are you intending to submit this to the Paclet repository? And we decided the answer to this question would be yes. So let's assume that for most people, the answer to this is going to be yes. And so Rick was saying, I mean, the first thing to do is to do, Bob's doing it here on the screen, right? File new, are you going to show them the?
Oh, yes, so this could be.
Or you could go to the
I don't
Paclet
think
repository.
it will be in the file menu in 13.2.
Oh,
but yeah, but you can just do create notebook of Paclet resource that, like I have here on the screen. Oh, here, I'll magnify this. All right, so just that create Paclet of Paclet resource, which will open this dialog. And then you'll want to choose where you're putting your Paclet. So I don't know, this is Todd's computer. I don't know where I should put
that's
this.
fine. That's fine, right? Documents directory.
I can, okay. So, oh, there's already one.
My Paclet is going to be a name in my documents directory.
Can I ask a question while we're going?
Sure.
Related. I was hoping that,
So
following Bob's talk yesterday, like we can actually talk about some of the trade-offs. Like you already started with, what's step one? Can we talk about like the trade-off, the pros and cons of what you might be trading off when you decide to share locally with a small group versus sharing larger with the world?
right. Well, I mean, there's privacy
privacy
and security, of course.
Well,
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
that, a little bit more than
Yeah.
that, please,
Yeah.
like, you're not going to be able to get this back, whatever you put in here, it's gone, but you might be trading that against the ability to sort of collaborate on GitHub with a gazillion other
Sure.
people, right? So like, I think that would be useful to talk about, right?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Do you want to work with him, Rick, while we kind of take questions? That'd be good.
What I've got are two functions.
Well, here, let me talk about, so, right. So, yeah, so I mean, I very much want to encourage people, if there's no reason not to put in the public repository, to put in the public repository and put the source in GitHub, right? Or some other public Git source control. And yeah, and that's that way, like collaborative development can happen via GitHub. We're not trying to compete with GitHub. We're not trying to create a new source control thing. We're just like a release process. So yeah, that's definitely what I'd like to encourage. I think the reasons not to do that, I think, is basically like if the design of your Paclet is very transient, you're kind of prototyping, you might make a bunch of breaking changes. Then you might, kind of put out a 0.1 version, just cloud deploy it or send it around. And that way it's very limited how many people are going to use it. And you can tell them all, hey, I changed this, update your code. But if you put in the public repository, it's probably best to try to avoid like those big breaking changes because you don't know how many people might be using it.
Right, and I feel like it's not just like me. I feel like it'd be a good discussion.
Yeah.
Because there's, for example, like the decision to clone or fork inside of GitHub versus a decision on the other, maybe on the other side where you're sharing it inside of open community. So, what I mean? Like there's quite a lot there.
Yeah.
Are you going to do source control of the master node, in GitHub, or are you going to do some sort of like, own all of it? What I mean?
No, I'm not sure. So who's the you in that question?
If you choose to share a Paclet
Yeah.
on GitHub, you
Okay.
upload it to GitHub.
Yeah.
As your distribution
Yeah.
mechanism. And then you allow it to be cloned or forked
Uh-huh.
and let GitHub manage the forking and recombining of
Sure.
of branches versus distribution within, let's say, it's any other mechanism inside Wolfram. You're now going to own all of that. Like, right, you're going to have to do like, are you going to fork it? Are you going to allow people to branch?
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, right.
Well,
Right. He's just saying like, what approach do we recommend people do? Right. Yeah. So if you do that, if you do GitHub, you accept some burden of sort of owning the repository. Yeah. That where if you just made a .paclet file and put it and posted it somewhere on community or in a cloud object, or then you're sort of washing your hands of it, I guess. But
possibilities, right? If you stay in, let's say that you choose consciously to go into the GitHub and allow it to branch. There could be examples where that draws a lot of energy, and it becomes it lives, it has its own life, right? That you essentially don't control anymore. Largely.
People can't do whatever they want.
Well, right, you could do that too. You could control the license, right? But again, like Linux didn't have a license, not really. It became a whole nother thing unto itself. I had 100,000 different programmers contributing. Like that could happen in a Paclet world.
could happen. If you, yeah, I mean, if you just opened everything up and you authorized other people to merge pull requests, and that's,
Yeah.
it could be very distributed and collaborative.
It's interesting. Like I don't get the sense that like many people here thinking like a DevSecOps kind of way. Like it seems like they think differently, but like it could be the beginning of allowing DevSecOps people to sort of make use of the Wolfram
Yeah.
stuff.
I think, yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely what we want. Yeah, it's sort of kind of have people realize that we are a, proper development, environment that just like, and that you can do all these projects. It's not just a thing that lives on a guy in a notebook on someone's computer and they maybe email it around, right? It's a proper development environment in the modern world. Absolutely.
I feel like that choice, you made it like early on, and it was sort of like almost like built like when you selected MIT license, like the decisions around like what license do you choose can have dramatic
Absolutely.
impact on what happens to your code. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm definitely not a expert on what on recommending licenses, but yeah, it's definitely something to think about if you're putting something out there that you want to maintain some sort of control over.
I was also thinking about the version. I mean, again, your form, maybe it's early days still, but like the form, like how do you decide about minor version releases versus major version releases?
Yeah, so we
like rubric that you're giving.
Yeah. So we encourage people to use semantic versioning. So, like a breaking change should be first digit thing, right? So that if people have been using 1 point something and liking it, they know that like if they have 1.2, they probably are safe to go to 1.3, but they might not want to install 2.0, right?
Is that spelled
and-
out though anywhere?
Yeah. So if you've published and it's already in the public repository, and then you make changes and you go to publish again, I wish I could demo this, but it's like it would take me most of the time to contrive an example. It'll pop up a dialog where it says, is this minor, major, or bug fix, right? Something like that. And I think that's the terminology we use. And a bug fix is the third digit. We want you to use sort of like 3 digits, and little bug fixes that everybody really probably is going to want should be third digit. Incremental additions to your Paclet should be second digit. And then like if there's a big breaking change there, you are fundamentally overhauling things and people will need to change their code in order to account for it, then that's got to be first digit. That's the big one that we really want people to follow, right? The difference between the second and third digit, there's definitely gray area there. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed here, I'm trying to create going simple to the Paclet resource notebook.
Mhm.
I just downloaded that. It's the first time I've used it. But what I've noticed on the Mac is that I have my desktop, I don't know if you're familiar with the Mac, but I have my
Sure.
desktop and my documents directory on the cloud, using the cloud, so it's not on my
Okay.
computer itself. And but Mathematica does not recognize those as big directories. So I get an error that says directory, it's not a valid directory. So it doesn't recognize desktop or documents as being a directory. It seems to know that it's on the cloud, even though the naming sequence is
Interesting.
yeah.
Those two directories have a cloud path. So if you go to /all, you'll find the
Right,
cloud
yeah.
path to those two directories, and you can give that path to that directory.
But just to say that the naming convention, you would expect that to function appropriately.
Yeah. That's not a case that I've run into because I have them local. Sure.
What happens here? So I've got a regular directory. It's to me, it's a directory.
So he's getting this message where he chose a directory, like in this dialogue in the previous step, and it gave him a little red message underneath that says it's not a valid Paclet directory. So what the directory you're choosing either needs to be an existing empty directory, so with nothing in it, or it needs to be a valid Paclet, which means it has a pacletinfo.m or pacletinfo.wl file already. So it's got to be one of those two things. So if you chose a directory with contents in it and those contents aren't a Paclet, that's when you get that message.
Okay.
So you probably just want to make a new empty subdirectory in that and select that directory, and then you'll probably be off and running. Yeah.
How will you handle versions of these Paclets?
Right.
Specifically, if
But
I
are
want
you
to get
good to
multiple versions
so
of existing,
basically right
then
now,
I'll be able to choose. which
other
one.
than having.
Right. Okay. So, right. Versions. So the question was, how do we handle versions, and especially like having multiple versions concurrently and being able to choose. So versioning, Paclets have a long history where versions are very important to it. And the way that Paclet managers work is if a user's Paclet, a user's local session can find a Paclet, they're going to use the highest version they can find that's compatible, right? So there are tools to enable and disable specific versions that we probably should build out. So that's from like an end user perspective, right? So you can disable a specific version. There's a function Paclet disable, I think, that then you would fall back on using the old one. From a developer point of view, we need to kind of, you can also install a specific version, but it's likely that you would, it's easy to accidentally then upgrade later, right? You have to be careful not to then accidentally install the update, which you can do. So you can say Paclet install of, here, let's see. Let me cancel this. You can say Paclet install of, from Paclet CI/CD. There's this, I can say like, 1.1.0 if that's a version that exists. Okay, well, that version doesn't exist. I can do Paclet find remote of this. See what's here. Okay. Oh,
If you guys said 0.33 star, it would have found the latest, biggest number.
all right. So this might give me a warning that says I have a newer. Okay, so that just did. So you can do that, and then, but then you have to be careful to not, ever do like the one argument form. A lot of people use like a one argument form in their code to like ensure that that some version is installed. So like that people just like put this in because if it's already installed, it's like a 0 out. You know, it doesn't cost you anything. So you have to make sure not to do these if you want to make sure that you're pegging it to a specific version. And then from the developer's point of view, we definitely plan on building out like a administrative, like a publisher portal where you can have a bunch of versions and you can mark one as like beta that people won't get unless they ask for it. That's still in the works. That doesn't exist yet. Right now, if you publish it, it's published, but that's something we're planning on.
Can I explain, like?
Yeah, sure. Go on.
Like actual software, like a dev prod
Mhm.
kind of thing
Mhm.
going on. And, I want to just work on my version of Paclet, like void versions that people are using, and do like test version where we can like try out something before we actually start it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, I think that's, I mean, so you can't run multiple versions of Paclet concurrently in a session. You can have them installed, but you can't, it's just a, namespace where symbols have down values. And if you load an old version, a new version, then the down values are all going to be there, right? So you can't like sort of run them concurrently in the same session. That's never going to be a thing. But yes, so you can you can have a development version that you're working on locally, and you can load that with Paclet directory load is a great tool. But that's not bringing it down from a server. That's just running the source code that you have in your local Git repo, right? So you can do that. You can also a common idiom might be like have branches on GitHub where you do builds and you have .paclet files on GitHub, and then your team can grab those from there, right? So that then the general public, when they do Paclet install, won't see it because it's not on the Paclet repository. It's just on GitHub. So then you just need to like point directly at the URL of the .paclet file on the branch, and you can use whatever sort of branching scheme you want to come up with. Just as long as that the version of the Paclet that you built there is higher than what's in the repository. So that's sort of a workflow that I think is common and could work. Yeah, you can also cloud deploy Paclets. So if you saw in my talk yesterday at the end, I didn't publish in the repository. I cloud deployed it, and then anybody can use it, but they need the URL. So just Paclet install of the name isn't going to find it, but if you Paclet install the URL, we'll grab it if you know where it is. And so again, if the version's higher, anyone will start using it. So that would be another alternative to like just having releases on GitHub. So there's lots of ways to sort of create those test workflows. Yeah, but and you could create, if you're really invested, we can help you get a private cloud with a Paclet repository on it to serve as your a dev and test environment. We can do that. It's gonna take some work and some money though, I think. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Can you, on the line 29,
Mhm.
change the .2 to .star? Would that work?
That's a good question. I think. Oh, nope, it won't. One thing you can do, so Paclet objects are also resource objects now, if they're in the Paclet repository. So I don't know if people are very familiar. And that has this resource version that does support things like that. I think that should work. That wildcard. Hold on. Let's just set this to something. Right, so that works. And you can even do things here like greater than, yeah. I think things like this were, oh. Yeah, so you can even do sort of like, Wolfram syntax or like semantic versioning with between, greater than, that sort of stuff. And then once you have the resource object, you can do Paclet object of the resource object, I think. There we go. You can do Paclet install, I think, directly on the resource object. So, the Paclet repository is built on the resource system, just like the function repository and data repository. So under the hood, everything has a resource object, which is not true of the sort of legacy Paclet server that's been around forever. So you can, if you're familiar with resource objects, you can use all those tools. And we've tried to make it nice to sort of switch back and forth between the Paclet world and the resource world. Other questions, or anybody want help with anything? Sure.
Wolfram Alpha, we've used different data packs for a long time. I'll find it. Feel like that those two nomenclature can parallel with each other.
I think that's fine. I think data Paclets are distributed as Paclets, right? They're proper Paclets. They're just Paclets where the content happens to be like an MX file or something, right? So yeah, I think that's good terminology. It's like, I could imagine like people talking about this is a style sheet Paclet, where basically all it's delivering is a style sheet, or this is a documentation Paclet where basically all it's delivering it. I think that's good. I think that's good terminology. Yeah. Yeah, Bradley, or back Bradley.
If I have a Paclet that is using functions from 13.2, but I've declared the version for 13.1, does like the check button know that or see that? Or?
Yeah, that's something that we are actually adding. So we have all these check buttons that do inspection, and I think Rick is the inspection for symbol versions in 13.2, or is that still coming? Okay, it might not be in 13.2. It's coming though, where if you mark your Paclet as 12.2 plus, and then you use confirm and enclose, we'll say, hey, confirm didn't exist until 12.3. Maybe you should increase.
Like checking the version of all the symbols that I use manually.
Right. So we're planning to kind of automate that. Yeah. Yeah. I guess. Yeah. Yeah. It might not be in yet though, but that's something we have at least on a branch. We have that. Yeah, go ahead. Sure. If anybody wants to ask questions, just, yell. There's a couple of sort of half-baked functions in the function repository that can help get started. Let's see, what browser does Todd have here? Okay, let's see what, all right. So we got these Pacletize and Pacletize resource function. Pacletize, it works. It's not the best, but it can kind of get you started where here it'll create a Paclet layout and it'll kind of copy content into it. And that content can be files, or it can be like definitions that are in the current session. And it'll kind of get you started. That can be a helpful tool. We're going to add more of these. We're going to add more of these sort of like convenience functions to help you get started in the coming weeks, probably. Anybody else got any questions or want to look at anything? Otherwise, I'm gonna have to start telling dad jokes.
What's the appropriate, what I've got is a couple of functions in a notebook.
Okay.
I move those to WL files.
Yeah, so you can just copy the contents of the input cell and paste it over.
Just do normal cut and paste.
Just normal copy and paste. Yeah. Sometimes like line breaks won't be good and you'll want to go in and modify those. If you happen to be using VS Code with the extension, with the Wolfram extension, I don't know if you saw Brenton's talk on Tuesday, I think. Okay, if you happen to be using VS Code as your editor for .wl files, there's a like automatic format selection that does a pretty good job of like getting all the line breaks and white space nice. So
But just a simple copy.
yeah, just simple. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If it's so, let me see. Oh, palette. Yeah, so if you're pasting things in, you probably want to paste the code like in this area within the private context. And then if it's a symbol that you're going to want end users to use, you probably want to declare it here in the Paclet's context, right? So
Just for practice, I want two functions to be in separate WL files,
okay.
Just to see how multiple files function.
Yeah, so there's a right. So yeah, the way this is set up, the default, it's like everything in one package file, but most Paclets that you'll see in the world have lots of them, right? In this kernel, they'll have a lot. And there's sort of a few different like paradigms that people use to control loading. A lot of times people will take this file and basically all they'll have in it is like, get of okay, and that's in GitHub. Like, could search for there. Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it in the Wolfram?
No, it's in.
Ah, okay. Hold on. Zoom is. Oh, okay. All right. I'm still sharing. Okay. What? I've exceeded a secondary rate limit. Todd, how much searching at GitHub have you been doing? Oh, the conference is like the conference Wi-Fi, you think is? Mm-hmm. Slash camel case. Okay. Right. So here in the kernel directory, there's 3 files. This is basically exactly what you're saying. So there's 2 that are dedicated to specific functions that look like a lot like the ones we've been having. And then if I look at sample Paclet, all it's doing is calling get on those 2. So it's like it's just a loader file, right? So this is a very common approach where the .wl file that shares the name of the Paclet, all it does is load all the other .wl files in the kernel directory, right? So this is, you'll see this all over the place if you start looking around at Paclets. And then each of the other files has the begin package, begin private, and end package stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
People have already got a notebook for their packet. New notebook maybe has some fixes in it or something. How do they?
Yeah. So I'll answer loudly for everybody. So we had a question about the definition notebooks and like how we keep definition notebooks updated. And this applies to Paclet definition, function definition, data definition. So all of these notebooks under the hood are like templates that can be filled in by metadata. And when we push out and when there's an update to the template and you open your old notebook, the first time you try to do anything, use the check button, open the toolbars, anything, it's going to see that there's a newer version of the template available and it's going to ask you if you want to update to that version. And if it does that, it grabs all the metadata from the notebook, applies it to the new template, and you'll get all the new features of the definition notebook. So that updating mechanism works. And similarly, if you downgraded, like, so say, you know, in a year, you make something in version 14, but then you try to bring the definition notebook in onto your computer where you're still using 13.1 or something, it'll downgrade as well. And that usually works. You know, obviously you'll lose the new features. Sometimes you'll get some orange, yeah. Yeah, I don't remember where we landed. Hey, where did we land on policy-wise for auto updating in the repository? We allow it? No, we don't allow it. We don't, just by policy, we don't allow it. Users have to actively update.
And we don't allow, well, I think we can see it on submission, we would just put install.
Yeah, but we do plan on rolling out like a notification system at some point. Yeah, you can see that with function repository items now. If you're using a resource function and there's an update that's available, the next time you use it, you'll get like this blue box that says there's an update available. Stephen even showed it on here. I can, if I say,
I think that's true. I know it's true for
right. The problem is that you don't like invoke the Paclet actively in the same way that you do a function. So the time when we would prompt you is not clear. And now if this is like simulating like I'm starting a new session. Oh. All right, so we have these are this sort of a new UX element where for resource functions, it notifies either there's an update available. And we'll probably try to work these in for Paclet somehow or have some sort of notification, but it's not in place yet. That's still on the to-do list.
Could somebody just somewhere in the code have resource functions go to Paclet name
Yep.
I mean, that's one way to get that behavior now.
Yeah, that's true. And just like in the loading, just like at Paclet load time, you could just have resource object of your Paclet name, and then this would happen. Yeah, that's a good sort of convention. So you would, so yeah, so in addition to resource function, you can do this with resource object. So let me do this again. So actually, I can, it'll, it'll probably work with a Paclet right now, right? Wolfram ICD. Yeah, we were just playing, so 0.32.0 or something. So then if I had in the actual code of my Paclet, if I just put this so that it evaluated when the Paclet loaded, not like in the right hand side of a function, just at load time, then this is a message, right? Even though it's blue instead of red, it works just like messages. So this message would be issued to the user when the Paclet loads, and they would see. Yeah, so that could be used right away. Yeah. Although this will just update the resource. It won't install the new version of the Paclet. It'll only, we need to change that. Does it?
No, we would look at the session and then check the version.
Again, why do I need to quit the session?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't actually install this, so I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that doesn't work. That should have worked. Here, maybe I messed up my percents. That's a bug. That's not good. Is this a bad version? Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, I did. Okay. Oh, what happened there? Oh, I'm just being clumsy. It still says. How's that?
So you're getting information from the repository.
No, it's the same one. This is the local.
Use information on the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, that'll tell me about the cloud object. But oh, that could be it. Let's do this and let's do. All right, this, I think, okay, so now we got 31. And then we want to do this. And if we say update now, and then we do this, is it going to be, no, see, you still have, Yeah, we need to do that. We need to make that work. Yeah, that's something we need to make work. That update button needs to update, install the new Paclet. Yeah, from your doc pages. Yeah. Yeah. So if you need to have documentation installed, or if you have documentation installed, you should in document. I know how to do it in the internal docu tools, but in documentation tools, there's I think a link section, and it might even have like link to guide in it. I don't know if Brian's still here.
It does. Yeah, there's link to guide. And then under more link tools, there's link to system guide too, if that's interesting.
Yeah. And I think if you have the docs installed, it'll like list them all for you to choose from, and you don't need to know the exact name. Or if you don't have docs installed, you probably need to know the exact name, which isn't hard to do if you can find it, the web page. Ever tried eating a clock? It's really time consuming, especially if you go for seconds.
I have to leave. I keep doing it.
There you go.
By the way, if you have two WL files, I mean, you give an example, so I'm way behind this.
No, fine, it's fine. That's what we're here for.
So you had in the needs, you're creating this overall global WL file. Do you have to put the entire, the whole context in when you use the needs in the top level WL file? If you have multiple functions,
Okay.
yeah, in multiple WL files.
Usually you'll call get, not needs there.
Oh, well,
So-
two dashes, I guess.
Oh, yeah. The greater than. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
Is that the full context name that you have to use?
So the convention is that actually is like the relative file path with backticks instead of the file separators. And Todd can tell you how that can, like if you have a loader file, like if the .wl file that has the same name as the Paclet is just calling get on a bunch of other package files, right? The way that you specify those is like the relative file path from the kernel or from the Paclet directory with the.
It should work to just use the context.
Okay,
The full context?
but if the context has the same name as the file though, right?
Yes.
Yes.
With the other. Which should be.
When I'm looking at this, here I'm in the same kernel. So can I do this or do I have to do the full? So I have these two WL files. This is going to be the full stuff there. Okay.
Right. Like, so here's the example we were looking at earlier with, the.
Okay, good point.
I was asked about what makes a good Paclet, the one that might get featured on the homepage, or maybe like in a email or a blog or something. So mostly, yeah, the important things are spelled out in a couple of documents linked from the website. This creating Paclets one, which is kind of more teaching, and then a guidelines. Where's the guidelines linked? Where are the guidelines? There's got to be a link to it here, right? Oh, here it is, guidelines. All right, so we have this Paclet repository / guidelines. So this really tells you all of the conventions and guidelines and rules that we want you to do. A lot of these are not required or mandatory, but you know, these are sort of the general rules you should try to follow, especially, and it's a lot of them are about like how to write good documentation is a big part of it. But see, oh, here's the answer to somebody asked about auto loading. So, or auto updating. I mean, auto updating is prohibited. But yeah, so this is, you know, you have to choose a license, you have to write good documentation. And, you know, the styles of the documentation should try to conform to Sir Wolfram's standards. So yeah, that's it. All right, I think we're at time.